What should they do then?
Disappear for a month and do this instead.
Stop. Please stop using ChatGPT like it's Google. Get AI certified in 28 days and you won't recognize yourself.
So I'm over 42 and I just got AI certified in less than a month. One program changed everything. I didn't quit my job or spend
3 months' worth of fuel stocks to prevent a national shutdown. Authorities say they're working with oil traders to secure alternative supply routes not affected by the Iran war. Hana Mutasif reports from Harare.
Earlier this week, the price of petrol and diesel in Zimbabwe was between $1.71 and $1.77 per litre. Look at that board there behind me. Those are now the new prices. The price of diesel is now $2.05 per litre. The price of blend, which is the cheaper petrol, is $2.17. And the price of unleaded, which is petrol of a better quality, is $2.19 per litre. Zimbabweans are shocked and surprised by the steep price increase. This is the first time fuel has breached the $2 mark in this country.
I think this is going to cause a dramatic situation in the country. The increase in prices of every goods and services, I think that way it's going to be a hazard.
Now we don't know how we are going to cope with this situation. Prices are going up, even transportation it will go up also.
The government says the conflict in the Middle East is why fuel is so expensive now in this country. When people want to go shopping, for example, they normally go to the big supermarkets, or they can sometimes come here downtown to what we call the tuck shops to try and get bargains, goods at cheaper prices. Now, of course, when the price of fuel goes up, the price of food will also likely go up. In the past, the government has tried to impose price controls, try to force businesses to keep prices low, but that has sometimes ended up hurting the economy. Hana Mutasif, Al Jazeera, Harare.
Well, the escalating conflict in the Middle East is disrupting Kenya's tea trade. Nearly 65% of its tea exports go to markets affected by the war between the U.S., Israel and Iran. But with Iran restricting shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, vessels loaded with cargo are in limbo. Catherine Soy reports from Mombasa, a major global tea trade port where exporters are facing uncertainty.
Tea exports at a warehouse in Kenya's port city of Mombasa with nowhere to go. Buyers are offloading supplies that were destined for some Gulf countries. Eric Onyango shows us a blending machine that has not been operational since the US and Israel launched a joint offensive on Iran. Workers have been told to stay home.
The warehouse is full right now because teas are not moving. We also have some teas which the war started while they were in port. Those ones are also stuck in port, where we have around 267 containers lying in port.
60% of Kenyan tea is exported to Asia, Europe, and other parts. 25% is shipped to countries, but the war has disrupted logistics and the supply.
Exporters who had transported their containers to the port must go pick them up, and picking them up is not for free. That is going to double the logistics cost, especially within the country.
At the Mombasa tea auction, brokers bid for millions of kilograms of tea from 10 African countries. This is supposed to be the largest tea auction globally. It often trades more than $13 million a week. On a normal day, this room would be packed with traders. Many of them say they're getting nervous. Ceasefire places bids on behalf of buyers. He says the situation must be resolved quickly.
All those countries are Muslim countries who take a lot of tea. So if they continue in the state that they are now, then definitely that in the long term is going to affect even the economies, and the purchasing power goes down. So we are praying that everything, the war stops now, the petroleum starts flowing, and the cup of tea remains on the table.
The conflict in the Middle East is thousands of kilometers away from these tea plantations, but the fallout is felt here by farmers whose livelihoods depend on it. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Mombasa, Kenya.
Let's get to take a look at some of the other stories making headlines now. Pakistan and Afghanistan have announced a pause in fighting for Eid celebrations, marking the end of Ramadan. Leaders say the truce is conditional and it could be reversed if it's violated. Kamal Haider reports from Islamabad.
After weeks of deadly clashes between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani forces, both sides have agreed that they will observe a ceasefire that went into effect on Wednesday the 18th. It will last till the 23rd.
She just raised $75 million, so you never have to hope teams adopt new tools. We should probably talk about that. Meet Scribe. They're the workflow AI platform that's quietly taking over Silicon Valley, not by launching a better tool, but by fixing the part everyone underestimates, how work actually gets done. Most companies roll out new systems, AI mandates, and platforms, then hope teams adopt them, but that's setting things up for failure. Scribe captures real workflows as they happen, every click, every step, automatically. So instead of abstract documentation, Scribe gives you living guides based on how teams actually work that can be deployed across the entire org. That means faster onboarding, smoother rollouts, and less guesswork after change. It's why enterprises use Scribe during tool rollouts, reorgs, and day-to-day knowledge transfers. It's not another app. It's how work stays consistent as companies scale. If you're rolling out tools across teams or training at scale, it's worth a look.
Kamal Haider, Al Jazeera, Islamabad.
Well, despite border closures, food shortages and electricity cuts, one bakery in southern Gaza is using every available resource to make sure families can still enjoy their traditional treats this Eid al-Fitr. Here's the owner with his story.
بقدر اقل الامكانيات احنا طبعا شغالين فبظل الظروف الصعبه هو الحصار وتسكير المعابر والامور صعبه جدا فاحنا بكرم من الله وبمحبتنا احنا لشغلنا ومحبتنا للناس وهدفنا انه نخدم الناس فالاراده عندنا والعزيمه هي اللي خلتنا نقدر احنا نقوم في الشغل هذا مع انه شغل مش مستحيل اصعب من المستحيل احنا مش بنصنع حلقوم عشان ناكل ونشرب لا خدمه للناس او نعمل فرحه قليله بقلب الناس لانه ما فيش عندنا لا مواد لا امور لا اكتفاء فيش اي مقومات للحياه فاحنا بنصنع الحاجه بصعوبه وبعجوبه بنجيبها عشان نصنعها بس عشان نفرح الناس ونفرح اهل شعبنا لانه معابر مسكره وحياه مقفله علينا واحنا بنقدر من اي حاجه نصنع سعاده للناس. الراحه والحلقوم هذه عادات وتقاليد الشعب الفلسطيني، يعني احنا لازم تكون هذا موجوده في كل بيت، في كل مناسبه هي مناسبه العيد او شهر رمضان لازم يكون عندنا الكعك والمعمول والحلقوم. هذا يعني بنقدر نقول عنه تراث لشعبنا، يعني هذا موجوده لكل سنه في كل بيت في كل مناسبه عيد يعني. فاحنا يعني نصنع المستحيل انه نفرح نفسنا ونفرح اللي حوالينا ونفرح الناس الشعب الفلسطيني لانه شعب منكوب وشعب ما فيش له اي نوع من الفرحه.
Well, as the Iran war escalates, the quantity and quality of AI-generated content is soaring. A deepfake is designed to deceive, manipulate, or increase engagement during the war. Lucia Newman explains from Washington, D.C.
A massive Iranian missile attack in Tel Aviv.
Inside, keep moving.
Another one appears to wipe out a U.S. military base in Riyadh, while yet another causes massive damage to this building in Bahrain. All dramatic images that went viral on social media, all of them fake. A cascade of disinformation about the war in Iran is spreading like wildfire, contaminating social media with deep fake.
I'm in the middle of the Iran war with missiles and other deadly weapons whizzing past me. You probably don't believe me, nor should you. But today's generated AI has dramatically expanded the ability of propagandists and state actors to very easily fabricate satellite imagery that is incredibly believable. A new kind of information warfare.
Another example, AI-edited satellite imagery used by the Tehran Times, falsely depicting the destruction of a U.S. radar base in Qatar, although on close examination, it's not the real building. But most consumers don't know the difference. Researchers have found that Google's AI overviews and Google Lens sometimes produced inaccurate summaries by treating AI-generated images as real, while Meta's oversight board has criticized its deepfake detection mechanisms as inadequate.
Wake up, Daddy Son.
At the same time, the U.S. War Department is under fire for using official government media outlets to combine entertainment with real-life violence. Popular video games like these promote war missions in Iran, adding authentic military operations. The aim is to project power. In other cases, it's to confuse the adversary or the general public by exaggerating enemy damage, or, on the contrary, portraying the enemy as suffering greater losses. All of this creating a cascade of disinformation about what is already turning into a global security crisis. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Washington.
I'm going to be back in a couple of minutes. I'm Rob Matheson. Stay with us on Al Jazeera.
The latest news as it breaks.
The situation looks to be far from de-escalation as the continuous exchange of fire remains the reality on the ground.
With detailed coverage.
As U.S. casualties mount from the growing conflict with Iran, 3/4 of Americans say that the country should be cautious of regime change wars.
From around the world.
Evacuation orders were issued for this town, but it was just a few minutes after that intense Israeli strikes targeted the town.
Examining the impact of today's headlines, setting the agenda for tomorrow's discussions. International filmmakers and world-class journalists bring programs to inform and inspire you on Al Jazeera.
They're not only violating protesters, but they don't want people to cover it.
A critical look at the global news media on Al Jazeera.
You're watching Al Jazeera's extensive coverage of the war between the US, Israel and Iran. I'm Rob Matheson in Doha. Iran's military threatens to carry out more attacks on Gulf oil and gas facilities if Tehran's energy infrastructure is targeted again. President Donald Trump says the US did not know about Israel's plan to attack Tehran's largest gas field on Wednesday.
It should not, going forward, target Arab allies, Arab countries, trying to create pain, the pain that they created themselves.
And the Pentagon tells Iran to stop targeting Gulf countries while refusing to put a deadline on US military action in the Middle East. Oil and natural gas prices spike around the world in direct response to the strikes on energy targets. Brent crude is trading at more than $110 a barrel.
Energy prices is the top priority.
And the war in Iran and rising energy prices top the agenda at an EU leaders meeting in Brussels. Iran's army has warned it will completely destroy the energy infrastructure of US Gulf allies if its own facilities are attacked again. Tehran has been carrying out a wave of attacks on major energy facilities in Gulf countries. Sites in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates have all been hit. In response, oil and natural gas prices have shot up around the world, with the benchmark European gas price spiking by 35%. Oil now more than $110 a barrel. Qatar says there is extensive damage at Ras Laffan. It's the world's largest liquefied natural gas production facility. Iran's attacks came after Israel bombed its South Pars gas field. Now, President Trump has warned Iran against targeting Qatar's Ras Laffan again. And in a social media post, he says the U.S. was not involved in the Israeli strike on South Pars. Now, we've got correspondents covering this from Tehran, Dubai and Arlington, Virginia. First, we're going to go to Zain Basravi, who's in Dubai for us. So talk us through what's been happening in terms of those strikes in the Gulf, Zain.
Well, the day after those strikes that were very sobering, it really was precedent-setting, a taboo that has been lifted of Iran attacking its Gulf Arab neighbors over the course of the last 3 weeks, really reached a crescendo with this targeting of energy infrastructure, 5 locations in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. The next day, we're seeing, yet again, more attacks being launched by Iran against oil refineries in Saudi Arabia, at least 2 separate areas targeted. In Kuwait, 2 oil refineries at ports targeted and set ablaze. 6 crews working all morning to try to put that fire out. And just a little while ago, the UAE confirming that it is once again dealing with missiles and drones coming in from Iran, air defenses ongoing. We heard the boom just about 10 or 20 minutes ago. So the attacks are ongoing. The GCC countries are still dealing with being in the middle of this fight that was started by the US and Israel, where Iran is now retaliating. And they are likely as concerned about the rhetoric that is coming from Washington as they are about what is coming from Iran, including rhetoric and attacks. Pete Hegseth has just been giving a press conference in which he said Arab neighbors should not be attacked, but struck a very strong tone suggesting that there was going to be only more conflict going forward. And this is the real problem for GCC leaders. There's a cadence, there's a rhythm to this conflict. There's escalation by the US and Israel, there's retaliation and reaction by Iran, and then it stress tests the ability of GCC leaders to stay the course, stay out of the fight, but also push for a diplomatic solution. And that gets louder every time there is an episode of escalation. What we've seen is even before the attacks on oil refineries and energy infrastructure, the Omani FM, in an opinion piece in The Economist, was calling for dialogue and saying that there must be a return to the negotiating table, and suggested the idea to begin the process with a non-aggression treaty. Now, this is the first person to say this outside of Iran, a non-aggression treaty in the region. Now, whether or not that will survive these ongoing escalations, that is really the question that leaders here in the GCC are grappling with at the moment.
Zain, stay with me because I want to come back to you in a couple of minutes, but I want to go also to Mohammed Val from Tehran. Mohammed, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has just posted on social media. He says, our response to Israel's attack on our infrastructure employed fraction of our power. He said the only reason for restraint was respect for requested de-escalation. Zero restraint of our infrastructures has struck again. Any end to this war must address damage to our civilian sites. Let's go back to Mohammed Val. An interesting timing of this tweet, Mohammed, given the fact that he's talking about making reference to a request for de-escalation. What more do we know about this?
Well, not much, Rob. We know that there have been some efforts that were mentioned by the Iranian leaders during the last few days, particularly 3 or 4 days ago. Several countries getting in touch with Iran and asking for, a kind of return to negotiations somehow. But that has been, superseded by what happened, the killing of Larijani and 2 other main leaders in this country. And that's a pattern here that we see. Every time there is a talking about rapprochement or about negotiations, Israel strikes again and kills new Iranian leaders. So the Iranians here are looking at that as an attempt, a constant attempt by Israelis to botch any attempt at returning to the negotiation table. We have no clarity or details about who approached who to ask for that de-escalation and so on. But what we understand here and what everybody here understands in Iran is that Iranians are escalating in order to de-escalate. They are escalating in order to put enough pressure on the neighbors whom they say are cooperating with the Americans and the Israelis, particularly the Americans, and also put enough pressure, military and otherwise, on the Americans and even on the region as a whole and beyond with regards to what happens in the Strait of Hormuz, so that pressure can yield a kind of understanding that this war should end, that everybody is suffering, that everyone is paying a heavy cost. And so the Iranians are escalating, as I said, in order to de-escalate. And that's why the foreign minister has mentioned probably that phrase. And the Iranians are saying that as long as the aggression is going on, they have only to retaliate and do the same thing. So they have to retaliate. They have to strike back stronger and stronger, and they are promising to be threatening to have more weapons, more new missiles and so on, and they are talking about an open-ended scenario in which Iran can continue to defend itself. So that's also another message to the Israelis and Americans, that if they think that they are about to finish this war by defeating Iran, by obliterating Iran's capabilities, both military and otherwise, then they are mistaken.
That's Mohammed Raab breaking that down for us from Tehran. Mohammed, thank you very much indeed. Well, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is winning the war with Iran decisively and on Washington's terms. In a Pentagon media briefing, he was asked whether the U.S. had prior knowledge of Israel's attack on Iran's South Pars gas field.
We have objectives. Those objectives are clear. We have allies pursuing objectives as well. And the truth speaks for itself. I mean, President Trump was very clear about that. Iran has weaponized energy for decades. Israel clearly sent a warning, and POTUS has made it clear, very clear. Iran knows when you hit Karg Island and you hit military capabilities on Karg Island, which is the only thing we hit, we can hold anything at issue, anything. The United States military controls the fate of that country. Iran has the ability to make the right choices. It should not, going forward, target Arab allies, Arab countries, trying to create pain, the pain that they created themselves.
Well, Teresa Bo's live for us near the Pentagon in Arlington in Virginia. So Pete Hegseth, during that press conference that we covered, pretty bullish as usual. Nevertheless, he also mentioned that the Pentagon is seeking about $200 billion to fund the war.
Well, certainly. And Pete Hegseth came in and again saying that the United States was going to finish this, that the United States is winning the war, that the United States is in control of the country, saying that they have hit around 7,000 targets alongside Israel in Iran, destroying ballistic missile capabilities, drones, the Navy, among others. So certainly that's the message that the United States is sending right now. And what was interesting also during that press conference is Hegseth saying and threatening Iran, saying that Iran should not be attacking Arab countries, should not be attacking Gulf allies of the United States. Also saying that the United States is working alongside Arab countries in the region to increase defense capabilities to protect them from attacks coming from Iran. So certainly we've been listening the same speech in a way from the Pentagon, from the Secretary of War, about how successful this whole campaign is, even though the situation on the ground is completely different. The Hegseth saying that the United States is in control of the country right now, while on the ground the government continues to be in control. So certainly a same message, a victory message that many around the world are not seeing right now.
Yeah, and one of the things he didn't directly discuss, of course, with the strikes on the oil infrastructure that we've seen here in the Gulf in the last 24 hours. However, Donald Trump, the US president, has been talking about this.
Well, certainly, and Pete Hegseth did not mention quite specifically about the ongoing situation on the ground of the attacks on the oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf, and also that it happened in Iran. But we saw a social media from President Donald Trump saying that
You got Glovo. You got Glovo. You can order what you want. You can get what you need. You got Glovo. You got it all. Order a Glovo and receive it in minutes.
Whisperflow understood what I was trying to say and gave me the exact output I wanted. Check out the difference between this same sentence being dictated into Siri versus Whisperflow. Let's meet at 12 p.m. at Joe's Pizza. Wait, no, actually I can't do 12, so let's do 12:30. And instead of Joe's, let's go to Kelly's Diner. Whisperflow understood what I was trying to say and gave me the exact output I wanted. For longer texts like this email, they even format
that if Iran dares to attack Qatar again, it will blow up the entire South Pars gas field with a power that Iran has never seen before. Those were the words of the President of the United States on his social media account. So suddenly, even though Hegseth did not mention exactly what's been going on, Donald Trump was very clear to get that message out.
Teresa, thank you very much indeed. That's Teresa Bo talking to us there from near the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. We're going to go to Zain Basravi back in Dubai. We know that there was a meeting by the Gulf states in Riyadh just within, again, the last 24 hours or so. The states certainly seeing what's been happening as an escalation, particularly with the targeting of gas installations here in Qatar. What is it likely to mean on the ground here?
Well, we're getting a sense of exactly what the impact has been on the ground. We've talked about the economic impact. We've talked about the taboo removed of war being perpetrated by Iran on places where it is such an incongruent reality. But very practically, there's a report coming out from Reuters that gives us an assessment of damage at the Ras Laffan LNG facility that was bombed just yesterday. And this really gives us a sense of the kinds of things that GCC leaders are no doubt talking about, what is no doubt front-loaded in every conversation happening between leaders here right now. In an exclusive interview to Reuters, the CEO of Qatar Energy says that Iran's attack wiped out 17% of Qatar's LNG capacity for up to 5 years. That is a massive, massive hit. In the interview, he goes on to say that 14 LNG trains, 1 out of 2 gas-to-liquid facilities were damaged. Oil major ExxonMobil is the partner in the damaged facilities, and they have a holding stake there, with Qatar Energy holding part of it as well. They'll be losing 12.8 million tons of LNG for 3 to 5 years. Again, 17% of their export capacity. And all in all, this facility was a $26 billion facility to build years ago. The repairs of it, that cost still being calculated. And what the CEO is saying is that they may have to declare a force majeure for contract terms for up to 5 years and will not be able to meet their contracts for supplies to Italy, Belgium, Korea, China. The knock-on effects of this are now set in stone. What's happened has happened, and this is now pretty much a certainty that for the next 3 to 5 years, LNG supplies will be hit. Qatar supplies 20% of the world's global LNG supply. It is critical to the global energy chain, and it is a link that has been broken.
Zain Basravi bringing us up to date there from Dubai. Zain, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now is Ross Harrison. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. He's author of Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. Really good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. I want to ask you about this tweet that's come out from Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, on X. He says there are various elements to it, but he essentially says that our response to Israel's attack on our infrastructure employed a fraction of our power. Now, he's referring to what's been happening in the last 24 hours when Israel attacked Iranian gas facilities near the South Pars gas field, and subsequent Iranian response, particularly here in Qatar at Ras Laffan. He then goes on to say the only reason for restraint was respect for requested de-escalation. And that's the bit I really wanted to ask you about, because that's the first suggestion that I've seen that there is any discussion, if you like, about de-escalation that Iran is publicly reacting to.
Yeah, well, I think Iran, the day after, and realizing that at some point they're going to have to repair relations with the Gulf Arab states. I don't think there'll be much of an alternative to that. But I think there's something else going on here, and that is that they're also signaling they could escalate further should they be provoked. So I think it's double-edged sword. On the one hand, they're responding to calls from the Gulf Arab states to stop the missiles coming across into the Gulf Arab states, but also the fact that should things escalate from the United States and Israel, things could get a lot worse. They have more firepower it's being held as dry powder at this point.
I want to just bring you in on something we've been watching just off air at the moment, which is U.S. Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard and other intelligence leaders, parts of the intelligence community, who are giving evidence at to a Senate committee currently. It's part of an annual process that they give it essentially a breakdown of what they perceive to be the threats towards the U.S. However, she is quoted as saying that the objectives laid out by Donald Trump, U.S. President, on Iran are different than those of Israel. Now, if I understand it correctly, up to this point, Israel and the US particularly have been very anxious to be seen in lockstep, that they're in constant communication, that they are talking all the time. But now we have the head of intelligence saying that they're actually working to different agendas. How confusing is that going to make things? What kind of problems is that likely to make when it comes to prosecuting the war in Iran?
Well, some of this is inherent to the process of two countries working together during a war. I mean, we saw that during the Second World War between the United States and Great Britain. So some of this is natural. But I think the other piece of it, Rob, that's important to understand is that there are going to be deviations in terms of their interests. You know, Israel basically thinks about its security regionally. And we can see that because it really has very little regard for international public opinion. So they think about their interests regionally. And the United States thinks about its interests globally. And what the United States is hearing from its Gulf Arab allies is that this is going to be long-term injurious and deleterious to their interests and to U.S. interests. And now the fact that the war is more popular in Israel than it is the United States. So I think some of it is sort of structural and process differences, but I think some of the political interests and the fact that one country looks at things regionally, the other one looks at globally, is going to get wider over time, perhaps.
We are beginning to see elements of that because there is a tremendous amount of support in Israel for the war in Iran. They may not support Benjamin Netanyahu. Polls are showing that his numbers are down. They may not be happy about the fact that they are being attacked by Iran, but they do support the idea of the war. The situation is very different in the US, isn't it? And all of a sudden, again, we have two leaders who are working to different political agendas. Right. And again, does that give an indication that we might be seeing that separation, that diversion?
Yeah, it's too soon to predict that separation will actually lead to some kind of differences in terms of what an off-ramp might be. But I think it's important to understand that in Israel for the last 30 or 40 years, there's been a focus, particularly by Prime Minister Netanyahu, that Iran is the existential threat to Israel. And in the United States, a global power, Iran has not posed a global threat. And Donald Trump has said that past presidents have been foolish in getting us into forever wars. So I think it remains to be seen, Rob, in the coming days, how long this conflict goes on. But the longer the conflict goes on and the greater the escalation, and by the way, I think this is also part of an Iranian strategy, that from the very beginning, part of their strategy, as much of a guerrilla strategy as it might appear, was designed to separate the United States from its allies, from Israel, by inflicting pain on the United States, not just on Israel, and its Gulf Arab allies. And you may be seeing the nascent signs of that now. We don't know.
Really appreciate you taking the time to break down the context of that for us. Ross Harrison, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rob.
Renewables, and they really are not very keen to do this because they say this will basically Ukraine in this war. That's what Europe feels. So $100 billion is already promised as a loan to Ukraine, but now Prime Minister Viktor Orban of Hungary is blocking this loan because of a dispute about a pipeline. And this is something really crucial that needs to be solved very quickly. Before Ukraine is running out of money.
Well, global energy prices are also being affected by Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, as journalist Insamam Rashid explains.
It isn't just the attacks overnight at some of those energy sites across the Gulf that is rising up oil prices. It is, in fact, what's happening here is they've inciting fear on many of the ships that are now parked up, anchored down in these waters behind me. To my left, there are dozens and dozens in the Gulf of Oman, if not hundreds, where you can see at nighttime with their lights on, just sat waiting for some form of green light to pass through this now very dangerous way. And it is dangerous and perilous because Iran continues to attack vessels overnight. Yes, again, we saw a vessel just off the coast of Fort Khor-Fakkan, just a few kilometers down from where I am at the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz. There was a vessel that was attacked there, a missile had hit there, and that vessel was alight and burning for most of the night. And then just off the coast of Ras Laffan, where of course we saw that huge attack by Iran on Qatar's energy infrastructure there, it seemed that a vessel off that coast also had been struck late last night as well, meaning that waters in these areas, particularly around the Strait of Hormuz, still remain very unsafe.
Well, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands and Japan have issued a joint statement on the Strait of Hormuz. They've condemned in the strongest terms Iran's attacks on commercial vessels in the Gulf. And they've called on the country to cease its threats, laying of mines, drone and missile attacks and other attempts. Its threats, laying of mines, drone and missile attacks and other attempts to block the strait. The Six Nations say they're ready to contribute to what they described as appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait, and go on to promise other steps to stabilize energy markets. These include working with certain producing nations to increase output. An estimated 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Many countries are now scrambling to secure shipments through alternative routes. Julie Dager explains the possible options.
Iran is effectively blocking one of the most important shipping routes in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. Approximately 20% of global daily oil supplies pass through this narrow waterway located between Iran and Oman. The oil comes mostly from countries in the region, including Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran. So, what's the alternative? And are any of the options viable? There are two critical oil pipelines that bypass the Strait of Hormuz. The first is the East-West pipeline that runs 1,200 kilometers across Saudi Cake oil field in the Gulf to Yanbu on the Red Sea. The Saudi oil giant Aramco is moving to push flows towards its 7 million barrel a day capacity, but that doesn't compare to the nearly 20 million barrels that usually pass through the Strait of Hormuz each day. Second is the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline that runs 360 kilometers from the Habshan onshore field in Abu Dhabi to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman. However, this option is even more limited. It only has a capacity of 1.5 million barrels a day with a potential increase of up to 1.8 million. But that's still more than 90% less than the amount that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. There are two other pipelines that could be of importance. The Kirkuk-Ceyhan runs 970 kilometers, connecting Iraq's northern oil fields to the Turkish Mediterranean port of Ceyhan. It also has a capacity of nearly 1.5 million barrels a day, although it's now largely dormant because of regional tensions and disputes over production. And finally, the Gorajask pipeline, which was specifically built by Iran to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Before the war, its operation capacity was estimated to be around 300,000 barrels a day, which is significantly lower than its designed capacity of 1 million. It's also faced huge challenges, partly because of strict US sanctions targeting Iran's oil industry.
Just before we move on, I just want to point out that the alarms have gone off here in Doha. These are phone alarms that the government has put out, and they are apps that sound, alerts that sound on everybody's phone in the country. And that usually means that there is some sort of attack going to be happening in Qatar, that there is an elevated security level here in Qatar. We usually find that within minutes of those alerts going off, that there is some sort of interception and attack here in Doha. James Medway is the co-director of Verdant. It's an economic policy think tank, and he's also a former UK Treasury official. He says even if the conflict ends soon, it's going to take months for the price of gas and oil to return to their pre-war levels.
It confirms what we probably would have expected over the last couple of weeks, that this isn't going to be a temporary blip in the price of oil and gas in particular, that perhaps a few weeks ago you might have thought it would be possible for example, the Bank of England rate setters, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank to look through this rise in prices when they're setting interest rates and say that, okay, it's going to be temporary, the war will be over quickly and things will return to normal. What's happened now is that in addition to the Strait of Hormuz being blocked, we now have a severe and disruption to the basic production of oil and gas especially, that will take months and months to clear. So at this point, it looks like this will be a substantial increase in those prices stretching off into the distance. The challenge here is how much damage there is and how long before you can switch back in, before you can make repairs and get things back online. It is relatively quick if it's sort of superficial hits, relatively superficial hits on pipelines and some parts of infrastructure. It's any more fundamental. This is a substantial piece of work to be done. That's a slightly technical question here. The issue facing other governments and other businesses and everybody else around the world is whether there are reasonable substitutes that can be made for oil and gas during this period of time. We found the Spanish Prime Minister talking up the fact that his country is producing a great deal of energy now from renewables, and a number of European countries, the UK included, do now source a significant part of the energy they use, electricity most obviously, from renewable sources.
This is Al Jazeera's extensive coverage of the war between the US, Israel and Iran. Here's a reminder of the latest developments. Iran's army has warned it'll completely destroy the energy infrastructure of US Gulf allies if its own facilities are attacked again. Iran hit several facilities in the region.
The interview question that decides everything. What AI tools do you use? If you say Chat GPT, you're done.
Stop. Please stop using ChatGPT like it's Google. Get AI certified in 28 days and you won't recognize yourself.
So I'm over 42 and I just got AI certified in less than a month. One program changed everything. I didn't quit my job or spend thousands on courses. Instead, I joined the 28-day AI challenge.
What if I've never worked with AI before?
Perfect. This challenge is built for people over 40.
Yeah.
A simple learning routine that fits your life, not disrupts it, and the best part, you're AI certified at the end.
So when does the program start showing results?
In 1 week, you'll feel unstoppable.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks, you'll have your strategy.
In a month, you'll wonder why you didn't start sooner. Tap the screen to join us.
Palestinian authorities say they're not sure if it was an Israeli interceptor or an Iranian missile that struck the building. Today, Abraham is in the town of Beit Awa in the occupied West Bank.
This place behind me is a beauty salon where women were gathering to prepare for Eid al-Fitr when a missile struck. Now, the father of Hadil, who owns the salon, says he heard the loud sound, he heard the women screaming, and when he went inside, he saw many body parts. He also saw a small toddler. He took her out of the scene and rescued her. Now, this 3.5-year-old daughter has survived, but her mother, who was also pregnant, has been killed alongside 2 other women in this missile attack. Now, Palestinian civil defense teams say that this was an intercepting Israeli missiles. While it's difficult to conclude whether it was an Iranian-fired missile or the injuries caused from the shrapnel of the Israeli interceptor, this is the Palestinian narrative. Palestinians find themselves in the middle of this war, and the presence of illegal Israeli settlements that are scattered across the occupied West Bank make them even more susceptible, more vulnerable to these attacks. It's a difficult day here, Palestinians tell us. It's a town in mourning as Palestinians find themselves caught in this war that they did not take part of, they did not choose, but they continue to suffer from. Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, Beit Awa, the occupied West Bank.
Well, since the start of the US-Israeli war on February the 28th, a new wave of displacement has unfolded in the Middle East. The biggest impact has been in Iran, where millions have been displaced. Umar Kulsum Sharif explains.
The UN Refugee Agency is warning of an internal displacement crisis in Iran, a country of 93 million people. Now, the agency says Israeli and US attacks on Iran have displaced more than 3 million people in nearly 3 weeks. This represents about 600,000 to 1 million households. Now, Iranians are leaving the capital and major urban centers and are heading north. Now, we've seen residential areas in Tehran, in Isfahan, and Shiraz that have been targeted. Well, so far, Iranians are not leaving the country in large numbers. Commercial flights have been suspended as the airspace remains closed. Now, the US and Israel say they are targeting Iranian leaders, military and nuclear infrastructure. But Iran says thousands of civilian sites, including a school in southern Minab, have been targeted. Now, Israeli attacks on Lebanon have created another humanitarian emergency. Ground strikes, air operations have all forced hundreds of thousands of people from their homes. Now, the International Organization for Migration says more than 1 million people, that's about 19% of Lebanon's population, have been registered as displaced.
2 people have been killed and several others have been injured in Israeli airstrikes in the district of Tyre in southern Lebanon. These images show a strike east of Tyre and the destruction caused by that attack. I want to take you to a press conference that's happening here in Doha. The foreign ministers of Qatar and Turkey are holding a press conference.
How deep is the relation between our both countries and how important is the strategy between our both countries? This visit comes at a time where the unprecedented escalation in the region and the Iranian ongoing attacks on the neighboring countries within the